Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And list season continues today with what you have all been waiting for: another year in music down the pipeline. 2023. Today we are going to be talking about cumulatively our 20 favorite songs of this year, and let me tell you, there were no shortage of amazing picks that we had to throw up for this, and also just like tons of great perfect songs that all three of us had to leave off of our list. So this was particularly grueling, but I think that this year, above all other years, I am deeply satisfied with how this list has turned out.
Yeah, we had a pretty involved process with trying to cull this list down because it's really hard with songs, harder than with albums in a lot of ways, because different people can like different songs from the same album or from the same artist that came out that year. So we have a fairly involved process where we cull it down. But we do have a final top 20 for you all. I'm very excited about it. I think it captures a great swathe of the music that we all loved this year. So without further ado, let's kick off. Now, Youth Lagoon had something of a surprise comeback this year with the album Heaven is a Junkyard, first Youth Lagoon album in 8 years. Youth Lagoon, a kind of bedroom pop indie darling from Idaho that blew up with 2011's The Year of Hibernation, one of my favorite albums really ever. And it was nice to see them come back into the fray this year with a great record. And this song in particular just captures a melancholic energy while also making you feel really comforted and swaddled and just held. And it's been an absolute balm throughout this year, to be honest. Youth Lagoon's frail, soft, kind of warbly voice just hits this beautiful sound during the chorus as well, with these swooning strings, these gorgeous piano embellishments. It's a testament to how beautifully produced the whole record is as well. It just has a lot of vibrancy and lushness to it in a way that feels very new for Youth Lagoon as well, because again, those earlier Youth Lagoon records are, their whole kind of thing is this sort of noisy bedroom shoegaze sound. So to hear such clarity in a song like this is it's really beautiful, and it ends up making its very mournful tone feels strangely triumphant as well. I've had this one on repeat a lot this year. Really, really excited it made the cut. A beautiful song. Go and check it out.
It's rare these days that the Menzingers feel so primal and urgent. I think in a lot of ways that's since so much of their early material lived in that space of beer chugging, howling choruses and playing fast and hard and as passionately as possible. They've, grown into a more like almost like Tom Petty-esque candor. And I love that about them. I especially love the spots in that album where they lean into that really heavy. But there's something about the song Try, which is our number 19 pick here. It's one of those songs that's like, no matter how true this is, you listen to it and you're like, this is the most I have felt in so long. It just sets every part of my brain alight. I can't wait to hear it in a live capacity. It's so perfectly Menzingers-esque in how flatly relatable it is. It relays its emotions very flatly to you. The chorus is literally, I'm not all right. I'm losing my mind. I try. I'm running out of time. That's unexciting, me sitting here reading that to you, but when Tom May is howling it across the chorus, it's like, that's the realest shit I ever heard, man.
It's the Menzingers turning a sentiment that's just ultimately crushing depression into something completely anthemic. Because you put the song on and it's a fucking rager. It completely just goes the fuck off. This has been a regular staple of my on repeat playlist since it came out, especially hits in the car as well. Great fucking song. Love this one.
All grief, no relief, same story on repeat. Too broke to save the world, too broke to save myself. And it's like, bro, I'm being targeted. Running from the guns,
point and shoot. We used to play upon the playground. One of my biggest regrets is that I did not get to 2021's For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her in time to shout it out and give it its due respect, seeing as it's my favorite hip-hop album of the decade so far. But thankfully, McKinley Dixon came back with a project this year And not only did he deliver on the promise as like being a great artist who has fantastic potential, but we have an album that comes along and meets even more critical acclaim than that one and has thrust him into the spotlight of contemporary hip hop for a lot of people. Frankly, ever since I heard this song, I knew it was going to be my personal favorite hip hop song of the year. It is just an absolutely marvelous display of everything that makes McKinley Dixon a great rapper, and especially just a great curator in terms of his production. It's so full of life, this full band energy that's just brimming with color and personality. But the best part about this song is just how joyous it is. It's like there is a deeply felt sentiment at the heart of it, and you could read a lot of it as being particularly dark, but the way that he spins the tone of this song makes it one of the most head-bobbing, anthemic things of the entire year. His lyricism is always on point. His flows are tight. Everything about this is just absolutely wonderful.
It just also has this great, like, peppy piano part, this real kind of sunlit energy that gets you kind of in this real sort of nostalgic childhood mood as McKinley's kind of painting this picture of the carefree experiences of being a kid and running around, and then ultimately how that kind of brushes up with the harshness of the reality a lot of the time when you're a kid, and how a lot of the brutality of the things around you kind of don't seem that way necessarily when you've kind of got this, you know, these rose-tinted glasses that you're viewing it through. And his fucking flows and verses on here are just insane. I make the devil mad dancing with you, all the angels looking jealous because your halo is hoops. He has a great line, because up here I'm making Icarus envious too of my souls and wings and freedoms and the songs they'll sing when I see them. This song has been one of the most uplifting songs of the year as well, while having a lot of gravity and depth to it at the same time. So fucking check this out if you haven't.
It goes without saying that this song and this album were made more urgent with the passing of Fletch last year. But I mean, the great thing about the song is that it is such classic, full, impactful Depeche Mode relayed over the sentiment of the cycle of things with a band that is experiencing, you know, the inevitability of grief and the nature of letting people in and loving them, knowing and accepting, and then experiencing the moment in which they pass is, yeah, incredible.
Yeah, between this and another song later on the list, which is very special to me, it's been a pretty good year for heartbroken, grief-stricken ballads. I think that new Depeche Mode album, you know, got a good amount of attention and fanfare when it came out, but I think stealthily it is one of the best albums that they've ever put out, potentially. Like, it's not up top tier level, but I would say it's better than, you know, certainly better than anything they've put out since Playing the Angel, and I think it really holds up. And so I was actually, honestly, I was kind of spoiled for choice with picking a song from it as well. I also want to shout out the closer on that record, Speak to Me, which is just an utterly breathtaking song. But really, at the end of the day, it has to go to Ghosts Again, because it is such a bold, it is such a confident reassertion of everything that Depeche Mode have always been great at. Like, there are other songs on that record I love because they're challenging for Depeche Mode and they pull off things that are a little bit risky. But Ghosts Again is just boilerplate Depeche Mode, but elevated so much by the impact of the context and the power of the performances as well. It just has stealthily endured throughout this year. Like, I loved the song when it came out in February, but I think also it's benefited from having been out for a while as well, because it's really kind of simmered for me. It's just kind of sat in my stomach all year, and I've come back to it again and again and again, and it has felt like classic Depeche Mode through and through, like a really enduring standard for the band. I had to make sure this song was included in our video because it might be easy to forget about with the glut of great music this year, but Depeche Mode are still as urgent and important as ever, despite being thoroughly and clearly in a late stage and perhaps with an uncertain future. I would say give this a chance if you haven't, because there's a lot of great stuff here.
Number 16, I'm going with my favorite pop song off of my favorite pop album of 2023, and that goes to Miss Jessie Ware with the song Begin Again, which is just a sublime piece of new disco that has been absolutely essential for me throughout this entire year. I'm, again, not starved for picks when it comes to this album. If it wasn't this, it would certainly be something else. But when it comes to crystallizing everything that makes Jessie Ware a great artist and what makes the new disco revival that we've seen that's been kind of ushered in the last couple of years so great, is that this is just such a deeply indulgent, over the top, glitzy, glammy slice of pop music. It has such a driving rhythm to it. This song in particular has instrumental detail and flourish that just is basically unparalleled. Listening to it makes me want to dance. It makes me so fucking happy. It's so warm. It's so uplifting. It makes you want to find a dance floor or just an open space to be inside just so you can lose your mind and look like an absolute fucking goober doing so. What is this music for if not being able to not take yourself seriously, throw all yourself into it, and just have a fantastic time? And if there's one thing that I feel like a lot of people needed this year, it's a fucking fun-ass disco song that makes you forget the plights of the world and reminds you of everything that can still be fun and invigorating about pop music.
Yeah, and stealthily with a kind of profound, like, kind of underlying point to it as well. Can we begin again and be here we were at the start? Like, taking a cliche and elevating it through context in a really powerful way. I just want to say I love the way that she, specifically with this song, I love the little vocal cadences she has. It's so campy. Like, why do my realities take over all my dreams? What is all the purest love that filtered through machines? The way she kind of puts her voice into the rhythm is so nice as well. A lot of camp in this record, which is not new for Jessie, but the way she's lent into it is really great. And we may be talking about it again in our next video, so shh, stay tuned. Next up is the first song on our list that isn't on an album yet, because it is the lead single for the upcoming sophomore album from Don't Call Them Radiohead side project, The Smile, Bending Hectic. We're going to be talking about the album this is on, Wall of Eyes, very soon because it comes out in late January. But this song is, to me, one of the most momentous of the year, because I will forever remember the experience that Jake and I shared listening to it together for the first time.
Yep.
What it is it is a winding ballad with these kind of really strange, deliberately detuned guitar parts that kind of make you feel really uneasy. And it's like really powerful because, you know, Tom York is evoking Hamlet's soliloquy as he talks about considering whether or not to commit suicide. It's an incredibly dark song, and, you know, putting you into the perspective as well of driving it at a ferocious speed, approaching a hairpin turn, and basically trying to decide whether or not to end your life in that moment. And I love the way that it's a song about this incredible motion. Like this thought process that's happening across the space of seconds while you're moving and basically faster than you ever have. But it's slowed down to a crawl. It's like a bullet time song where you're experiencing just a few seconds of someone's internal dialogue spread out to 7 minutes. And the song feels that way, right? It feels like you're, caught in this moment but before something cataclysmic, even when you don't know what's going to happen next. And as Jake will attest to in the experience we have with this song, when you have this just awful discordant string part, thank you Johnny Greenwood, that's another clear nod to the influence of Penderecki on his music as well. You have this terrifying string part that comes in, and then just this explosive distorted guitar that brings a really kind of conclusive end to the arc of the story as well. It's a phenomenal song in every respect, but specifically just the experiential effect of hearing it for the first time, not knowing where it's going, and then hearing, Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, and Tom Skinner just go fucking sludge metal with it in the final couple minutes is just like unreal. And it's an incredible song. I would liken the experience of the song to the one that I had hearing Space Invader by The National for the first time. I actually think this song's even better, just in the raw power that it has, and particularly in the lyricism as well, which is circumspect but really impactful, I think. I can't wait for this fucking album, man. This song absolutely blew us away. So, bring it on. If there's no more Radiohead, fine. If we're gonna keep getting music of this quality from The Smile, I consider me satiated.
I mean, another reason why this is a year highlight song for me as well is that it's also, I feel like, the song that's come from this project that has fulfilled the potential and promise of The Smile as a group the most. That first album that we reviewed very favorably when it came out that year, and that I still absolutely love and listen to tracks from all the time. This is still the first time where I feel like the material has been something that everyone who's taken part in it has been like, there's feels like a conscious attempt to up the stakes for this project. And that's what makes me so excited to see more music from them, is that they are restless innovators, even when their name, like, no matter what name they're actually like performing music or making music under, it doesn't matter. It's just that these guys want to push the boundaries of rock and electronic music for as long as they do anything, and that hasn't changed whatsoever. So fucking bring it on, man.
We've gone over the edge. If you've got something to say it now. I'm letting go of the wheel. Despite these slings, despite these arrows, I'll force myself to turn. God, the way he delivers that is just... It feels like a fucking £1 million weight is just completely collapsing you. What a song. Next up, something a bit lighter but no less hard-hitting musically, Carly Rae Jepsen's Psychedelic Switch, which is my second most listened song of the year. We'll get to my first most listened later on this list. Carly Rae Jepsen's album, The Loveliest Time, which initially was kind of perceived or packaged as, the latest in a series of addendums to proper Carly albums, but kind of developed a life of its own as a really kind of fully realized project in its own right. Jake, you gave a really full-throated argument for why you think it may be Carly's best, or if not her absolute best record to date. And certainly it's got no shortage of highlights. It's one of the most exciting things about The Loveliest Time is how many different guises it presents Carly in, and how she absolutely nails the vast majority of those. But none for me have been more impactful and more addictive than the hardcore house of Psychedelic Switch. There's no real better way I can describe it than that, because not only is this just like a kind of pounding, house beat driven addictive song, the way it's produced as well is just loud as fuck. It's just completely explosive. It makes the feelings that Carly's always chasing in her music, these feelings of the rush of love and infatuation and connection, makes them feel legitimately like being hit with a fucking 2x4 when you listen to the song. It's just so propulsive. Put this on your headphones, put this on your stereo, you will feel the impact of every second of this song. I think it's one of her greatest songs to date. Definitely her best song since, I would say, at least Cut to the Feeling. I have not been able to get myself sick of this song all year round. It's just the rush and the energy and the fire that I didn't know Carly still had, because to me, one of the things that's felt like a bit of a letdown with Carly in recent years is how that just pulse and just vibrant sort of impact of the songs on records like Emotion and Dedicated, it's felt like it's been a little bit lost in recent years for stuff that's a little bit more kind of conventionally produced, I suppose I would say. But man, this just brings me right back to the feelings I experienced listening to that first half of Emotion for the first time all those years ago. So shout out Carly, delivering one of the year's best pop songs with Psychedelic Switch. I also don't know what the fuck she means. What is the Psychedelic Switch?
It's like
50 times. I don't know what that means.
Nope.
It's like so many great pop hooks where if you think about it for like 5 seconds, you're like, what? Another song that I haven't been able to get out of rotation since I first heard it. It's kind of difficult to talk about because it just does everything that you want a Spanish love song to do.
It's the classic Spanish love songs track, it's also got a few extra things in it, like twists added to it that just make it more colorful, make it feel like more anthemic, more larger than life because of the sound they've pursued on this album. So it's like, yeah, it gives you all the same feelings that the songs on Brave Faces Everyone gave you, but it also just gives you that extra bit of like fucking war on drugs type like hugeness. It's such a good song.
The bones of the song feel so familiar, but the shell of it is so expansive, and it's a really exciting direction for the band to take, especially when I heard this song for the first time. It was sort of like, oh, they could do this.
An incredible song that's like both satisfying as a fan of Spanish love songs, not only because it takes their sound and makes it feel larger than ever in a way that works, but also the way that it calls back to lyrics on the previous record as well. You know, it won't be this bleak forever. It will be this bleak forever, but it is a way to live. You know, it's a great song. It has all the ingredients of a classic, and the best part about it is, even though we've talked about it in terms of what it delivers for you as a Spanish love songs fan, it would also be the perfect thing to play someone who's never heard of the band, because it completely sells them in 3 minutes.
This is something that I'm really glad we got to shout out, both because Indigo De Souza is somebody who has certainly gained attention and a bit of a following, but feels like she's on the cusp of really breaking through and just hasn't quite made it there yet. But the remarkable thing is that she's done that by making 3 excellent albums so far that have still slightly gone under the radar. And All of This Will End, the album this is from, is no exception. And this album is a bit more, I guess, piecemeal than the 2021's Any Shape You Take. It's more of a cohesive, compact experience that just sort of flows out of different ideas and has some more substantial moments and some more interstitial moments, but it really shows her kind of flexing her versatility when it comes to her slacker rock influences, when it comes to just like everything about an album, like in what makes it constructed as an album. But nowhere better is the showcase than the climax, the closer here, Younger and Dumber, which is a song I've been enamored with ever since I heard it. The way that this manages to pull off being the incredibly cathartic end to this very kind of fraught record that's full of personal turmoil and self-examination. And Younger and Dumber both is that, but it also fulfills an arc within the record that makes it very supremely satisfying as Indigo contemplates what it is exactly that led her to the point that she's at in her life after being really fucked up by a relationship that she was in. A lot of this song is sort of pondering how exactly do relationships like this end up affecting you in like a macro, like once everything is said and done, what does that do to you? Does it change you fundamentally, who you are? And this song explores these ideas really, really well, and also just as an absolute knockout instrumentally. Like, this is the ideal way to make a climax to your record. I mean, like, the final 2 songs on this album are like the closest I think an album has maybe come to pulling off the final leg of something like Punisher since Punisher came out. This is certainly Indigo's I Know the End. But there are just so many great examples of lyricism on here that exemplify exactly what makes her amazing. You came to hurt me in all the right places. You made me somebody.
That was exactly the lyric I was gonna shout out. Fuck.
Which way will I run when I want something new? I don't feel at home in this house anymore. Which way will I run when I'm over you? I don't feel at home in this town. Sometimes I just don't want to be alone, and it's not because I'm lonely. It's just because I get so tired of filling up the space all around me.
That's the
Few
shit.
lyrics have hit harder this year than that one. Like, you don't need to be going through a breakup to feel the palpable heartache on this. But not only is it cathartic in how it explores the sadness of this, but it's also really meaningful, as in this point in the record, it's Indigo sort of shifting the blame away from herself and, you know, accepting that everything that she's gone through is not entirely her fault, which means that, you know, you get a really satisfying end to a great journey of an album, even though it's only a 30-minute long record. An absolutely golden example of how you finish off a fantastic statement, but also something that does stand on its own as something that is plainly great and fantastic. It's something that makes me really excited for the future of indie singer-songwriter music.
I'm glad you pushed for this. I love this song. And I put the song Real Pain off of her last album very high on my songs of 2021 list, and it didn't quite end up making a video. It was very close. So I'm glad we get to talk about her in this context because the song is fucking incredible. I don't have anything to add. I just want to basically co-sign everything you said. Shout out Indigo. Just keep fucking going.
I was keeping it together emotionally until the lap steel guitar. And I was like,
oh,
They
God.
got you. She got you.
Put on my cowboy hat.
Ain't no one sadder than a cowboy. Don't know what I mean by that. Our number 11 on our list is one of the most dazzling songs of the year, is the word I'm going to use. I won't get too far into it because it should be a surprise to no one that we're going to be talking about the album this is on in our next video. But I want to shout out FaceTime by Billy Woods, featuring Samuel T. Herring of Future Islands, a very important feature to the song because it is kind of the glue that wraps this all together and turns it from another great deep cut on this Billy Woods album to a stellar piece of hip hop that stands out as one of the best songs of the year. This song captures so perfectly what it is like to be communicating with the people you love at distance, whether it's a physical distance or an emotional distance, whether you have to engage with someone because you need them or they need you, but you're feeling a kind of mental distance from that, you're kind of dissociated from that, or whether you're trying to connect with someone who's just not physically there and you're having to be mediated through screens. It's something the album speaks on a lot of detail. We'll get to that. But this song in particular really stands out just because of how Billy ratchets up his intensity so subtly, so slowly as the song goes on, piece by piece by piece, until, you know, that climactic, almost hollering delivery of I don't tread water, I sink. And then Samuel Herring's one of the most talented vocalists of our generation, if you know, you know. But his hook coming in just like butter, just completely sizzling across the track as well. The perfect compliment, not just to Billy, but also to these really kind of easy to overlook, but so pivotal, like mournful trumpets that are just kind of like whistling along through in the background of the song with these kind of dazzling kind of compliments over top of them. Just an immaculately constructed piece of music, a masterclass in engineering as well. Shout out Kenny Siegel, who produced all the beats on the record and who absolutely nailed it with this one. It's so perfectly exemplary of this weird sort of unusual but really attractive dark jazz hybrid that a lot of the album's sound is. And this song in particular, I think, is just the standout among standouts, a complete showstopper. So check it out if you haven't.
Hiding in a breakfast chicken, weave, tug and roll.
I'll be there with you, but I'll be on the phone.
God. You can take it out. The first time I heard that song, I was like, that's the dude from that song in Top
I've
10.
been waiting on you.
I'm like, that's not the same, man. He ate a Cookie Monster on that song.
Yeah. I've been waiting on you. He's so good. Fuck, man. What a great singer. Now we move into the top 10 and we kick things off with
on one hand, it feels so like typical of Wilson to release such a show-stopping 10-minute long progressive piece of music to such a degree that it's almost like, well, of course this is on the next Steven Wilson album. But especially after, whatever that last piece of shit was called, it was particularly invigorating to hear that, Porcupine Tree aside, he was still interested in pushing his own solo envelope further, putting together the most breathtakingly exciting progressive fusion song that I've heard this side of a Thank You Scientist album. Like, just big brain, massive brain almost completely instrumental song, which like it's a song that is constantly gives the feeling that it's going to shift into a different mode in like a like a 3 years older or luminol style, but it just continues its own momentum throughout its entire runtime in a really energizing way. I don't know, it's like fucking great stuff.
Jake and I dedicated a whole video to this album, and I think it was partly because that was the sort of scope that was necessary to cover what Steven was doing with it. And I mean, Impossible Tightrope is very much the centerpiece of the record, and it's in weird ways that make sense once you've heard the record. It's both completely emblematic of what the album is and sounds completely different to basically almost every other song on it. It's like,
Yeah, having heard like I did like a really focused, dedicated listen to like the first 5 songs on it, and just I think he like put some shit up about Israel like the following day, and I was like, I just need to I need to get away from you for a bit.
God,
and
real.
I just haven't been back since, although I completely planned to.
yeah,
Um,
you'll love it.
yeah.
At the very least, you'll like Staircase because it does basically the same thing that Impossible Tightrope does. But what I'll say just in brief is like, yeah, it's emblematic of all of the things the album does while sounding very little like anything else on it. And how it's emblematic is that the whole point of the record, in a lot of ways, it's like Steven Wilson taking the things he is best at, which is, these massive sweeping progressive compositions driven by guitar, and then just kind of pushing them to the left like 90 degrees and putting them in a context that feels new, which is this fusion jazz space that so much of the song occupies. It's really exciting because of how well it blends the familiar with the novel in the context of Steven. Like, as soon as the galloping rhythm kicks in, you've got that guitar. I can't even like describe it. I just have to make the sound it makes. Like, Jesus, this is 10 minutes of fucking heaven, man. You're not going to get much better progressive music than what you hear on Steven's new album. Not because it's a perfect emblem of prog rock or whatever. It's very deliberately not, but because it showcases all of the different ways that progressive music can feel new, exciting, and genuinely innovative in the 2020s, 50 years on from the heyday. So, yeah, the Impossible Tightrope, bravo.
Dancing, dancing.
Next up is one of the most arresting songs of the year for me, a perfect example of dynamics, space, and impact from an artist who I consider one of my favorite vocalists of the last 10 years, one of my favorite songwriters of the last 10 years, one of my favorite producers of the last 10 years. The guy does it all. It's Sampha. And the song is Dancing Circles. Worth noting as well that Jake had Spirit 2.0 from the same album on their list too. We're spoiled for choice with this new Sampha record. It's fucking incredible. And my pick was Dancing Circles, and it made it quite far up my list because I have never heard a song communicate the intimacy of connection, of physical connection with another person in the way that the song does, which is like conveying intimacy through sparseness and space. It's really, really interesting. There's these striking piano chords, there's this kind of plinking minimal beat, and there's Sampha's voice. And the way that it situates you in this real physical dance between these two people, this shared moment of intimacy, while making you feel as though you're in a fucking celestial ballroom that stretches light years across. It's so unique. Sampha's someone who can take really universal feelings and through his just absolute mastery of production and his insanely creative vision can realize them in ways that feel so alien, so novel, so creative, so new, that it takes a little bit to adjust to Sampha's creativity because you're not used to hearing someone create music the way that he does, build soundscapes the way that he does. And whether it's Spirit, whether it's Dancing Circles, whatever song it is, Sampha never lets the side down. His new album, Lahai, one of my favorite albums of the year, an album we gave a glowing review to. Go and check it out if you haven't already. And see what you make of Sampha's really interesting approach to space and intimacy, because it has something that's really engendered a real fondness for me. I love when artists can take a very familiar sensation, a very kind of simple sentiment, a very universal feeling, and express it through sounds and soundscapes and production in a way that you've never heard it done like that before. And I think that's what Dancing Circles does really well.
Sampa's new album, it reminds me of what you said about when we reviewed the newest War on Drugs album, is that it feels like you should be paying a subscription service just for the privilege of listening to it. Like, it's so ornamental and detailed, but it never sacrifices its immediacy, even though it's so focused on building an environment with sound. And that's what I think that Dancing Circles and Spirit 2.0, which are right next to each other in the track list, accomplish so well. Like, the front half of this album, I mean, and the back half, but the front half of this album in particular is just like knockout after knockout after knockout. And it made me like, I didn't know like Sampha just because I wasn't really as familiar with his features on stuff in the past. So I basically discovered his music over the course of like the month that Lahai was released. And now I have one of my favorite voices working in like the neo soul realm. Like, this is just like an absolute treat to listen to. It's one of the albums this year where I feel like I was the most enamored by just like the art of sound construction.
I mentioned earlier that Psychedelic Switch by Carly Rae Jepsen was my second most listened song of the year. This is my most listened song of the year. I have listened to this song more times than I have slept in 2023. That's how much Show Me How by Foo Fighters has come to kind of imbue the ambient soundtrack of my brain, my psyche, my waking moments this year. It is a perfect melancholic song. It's not just that it's about the grieving a band member or grieving the passing of your mother or whomever the song may be directed towards. As you may know, if you've heard the album, there are multiple layers of grief to Dave Grohl's writing in this record and in these songs. But it's not just that Show Me How works on that level because it channels that particular, intimate feeling of grief. It's a song that channels the feeling of realizing when someone's no longer in your life anymore, not just that how much you love them and how much you miss them and all that kind of obvious stuff, but also how much you kind of needed them to steady you and to direct you. Who will show me how? It's so simple on the face of it, but the underlying implications of that sentiment in the context of grief as well, the more I think about it, the more it just completely unravels me. Yeah, who the fuck will show me how? It's a song about the loss of independence that comes with grief as well. It can be a weirdly kind of counterintuitive thing too. You would think that losing someone would kind of, in a weird way, make you more self-reliant. And ultimately it does in some ways. But there's always that period of a loss of independence, of a feeling of crippling helplessness that comes in that period as well. And Show Me How is as good a song as has ever been written about that feeling. But even more than that, even more than interpreting it, even more than the lyricism, the feeling of this song, the sound of that guitar when it comes in, the space, the ringing, the way that it all has this kind of hazy softness to it, but it also has this kind of ringing clarity at the same time. And then that tonality in the guitar coming up against Dave Grohl's drumming, in particular the way he hits the snare in this song, just the way the drum production sounds as well. It's really tight, it's really crisp, it's really hard hitting, as you'd expect from Foo Fighters too, but there's something about the way those elements mix in the song that just melts my brain. Just the drumming is so, it's like the drumming is a stitching that is kind of piecing you together. You're an open wound. The song, the guitar part is just this ringing thing that's just kind of like hanging out there, unfinished. And the drumming is kind of like piecing it together into something that can stand on its own. It's a beautiful melding of sounds that creates this feeling of healing without ever having to directly, lyrically, allude to that. And then, of course, you have the contributions of Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl's daughter as well, who contributes vocally to the harmonies in the song and to the backing vocals of the I'll Take Care of Everything over the chorus, which, man, if I only had, not only that if I only had one song this year, if I only had one thing that someone said this year to keep, if I had to lose everything else, it would be just the way that Violet Grohl sings I'll Take Care of Everything. And then the way that she does the vocal harmonies, the oohs that she does. in the back while Dave is doing this ridiculous fill that shouldn't work in a song, this set it, but absolutely does. It's masterful. You know, I've always had a great fondness for Foo Fighters. I went through their entire discography in the lead up to their last album, and even though I was, you know, kind of in a weird place of having to end on a downer note because I'm just not a big fan of those last couple records, for them to come back in the way that they have, and we'll get to it, we'll talk about it in more depth in our next video, but for them to come back in the way that they have, and for them to deliver a song like this as well, which has ended up being so powerful and affecting for me that I can't rank any other song from the year above it, it's a testament to one of our greatest working bands, and I think also a band that we sorely risk taking for granted. So shout out Foos, shout out Show Me How. It's a truly healing song.
God Made Me an Animal is the first project to come out from the hardcore supergroup Better Lovers. For those not in the know, this podcast is absolutely in the bag for Greg Puciato and the Dillinger Escape Plan. We did an entire video on their discography, one of my favorite videos we've ever made. Morgan is wearing a Dillinger shirt, and Dillinger ending their career where they did is probably the right move, but I can't say that, you know, Greg Puciato's place in the world of heavier music hasn't been missed. Sure, he's had his solo stuff that's, you know, been really interesting in and of itself, but like, for as much as I enjoy some of that stuff, it's not the same, I guess. So the prospect of him coming back with the backing band, essentially, of Every Time I Die, it's so tantalizing that it almost feels inevitable that whatever this band would make would be disappointing. And the miracle of the Better Lovers project is that it is in no way disappointing or even creatively like hitting the same beats as something like Every Time I Die and Dillinger, is because these two figureheads have synthesized their like best qualities to make something that doesn't feel like anything that they've made before. And I feel like the apex of this new creation is the title track on here, which it's easily one of the things I've listened to the most this year. Greg Puciato absolutely lay waste to these vocals. I mean, like, as great and dynamic a performer as he's ever been, the intensity is revved up to 11. I love the southern rock riffage that's all over this album, but particularly on God Made Me an Animal. It's very reminiscent of Every Time I Die, but it adds a very specific tenor that band didn't quite have. This is a project where all of the songs are about, you know, the confines of toxic masculinity and trying to live up to this sort of idealized emblem of all of these masculine archetypes and living in the shadow of it and how it can contort and make you monstrous. And I feel like that's really well epitomized on here. Not only is this a song that just kind of goes super hard, but like from an emotional standpoint, it's the most I've connected with like music of this kind since maybe Dissociation actually came out. Like the bridge at the end of this song, I think, is just stellar. Like lyrically speaking, when Greg dials it back, you have deny your skin and bone, pretend the flesh hides stone. I'm sitting here, we're talking, but we know we have to go, and I'm afraid there's nothing that can make this clearer. I wish we could be nearer, anything to get you here or closer. And the idea of wanting to reach out and wanting to be like freed from this, you know, prison essentially, and craving human intimacy, it feels like it's tapping into a sort of sense of disconnect that I feel like a lot of people feel right now. And when you combined that with the sort of alloy of just Greg's intense performance and the band just going absolutely stupid, you have one of the most cathartic projects of the year, and this is the perfect way to end it off. Every time I've listened to the song this year, it's been like an absolutely sublime exhale that I come away from, and I'm like, I feel leveled.
Don't wash the cast iron skillet.
My song of the year, Cast Iron Skillet by Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. This is one of the finest storytellers spinning a yarn that is both deeply felt and heart-achingly relayed over, you know, a fairly simple but full musical instrumentation and construction and composition. Yeah, I think it's stealthily one of his best works as a producer on this album as well, just for how resonant everything is and the relatively minimal tools that are being used on this song in particular.
We won't get into it much because it's not even a spoiler to say we're going to be talking about this album in the next video.
Mm-mm.
But and look, I don't come from the same background as you two, but I come from a background that, as we've remarked over the years, is weirdly analogous in a lot of ways. It's just like a different version of the same reality. And in those kinds of backgrounds, you get a lot of truths beaten into you. And a lot of the time as well, you get very traditional rote ideas dressed up as wisdom and presented to you in a way that you are taught and very quickly internalize as sageness, as the way things are. What the song is it regaling these truisms that Jason's and many people like him have had beaten into them, but also twisting them in a way that reveals the hollowness, that reveals the shallowness, that reveals the ultimate danger of them as well. Don't drink and drive, you'll spill it. The way that these truisms, these shallow, meaningless, and ultimately harmful truths can leave you empty and looking for something to fill that emptiness. And then the way in which he goes into these separate stories, these tragic stories of disconnection and pain and grief and suffering that could have been avoided or could have been mitigated if a little more humanity was inserted into the equation. You won't find a songwriter who is better at holding a fucking mirror up to the underlying toxicity and harm in so many things that are taken for granted as normalized standard things you experience growing up, that experiences you should have, things you should say. No one is better at simply holding a mirror up to those things and revealing the skeleton underneath. No one is better at doing that than Jason, because he never preaches in doing it. He just reveals. And no song of his is better at doing that than Cast Iron Skillet.
All right. Kicking off the top 5, we are going to go with 2023 is a year that has been filled with many a music discourse regarding dozens upon dozens of things, but I think the one and perhaps most thoroughly disillusioning thing for me was the skyrocketing popularity of Boy Genius and how this has suddenly put them into a light where talking or even thinking about any 3 of those girls whose music I absolutely adore and consider integral to my musical taste, I loathe the thought of it. I don't like thinking about this. I don't like reading other people's takes on it. So it stands as a testament to how fucking great of a song this is that it even made it here in the first place. Let alone the fact that this is on my permanent rotation since even before the record came out. Like ever since this was released as a single, the first thought I had upon hearing Not Strong Enough was, this is a new instant standard. Like you just hear a song where you're like, this is gonna be a classic. This is gonna be a song that 10 years from now, people are gonna know every single fucking word to because it's timeless. And that's exactly what Not Strong Enough is. Everything about the appeal of Boy Genius, it's all here. Everything that you could possibly want and everything that could possibly fulfill you about the prospect of this super group, technically speaking, is here. It's catchy, it's deeply emotional, it's resonant, but it also just has like moments on it that take your breath away. I mean, the first moment in music this year that I fell in love with was certainly the opening track on the newest Parannoul album, but I think the second thing that I was the most like just completely enamored with was the always an angel, never a god moment on this song, which is just, I mean, fucking sublime. Like when it comes to the structure of just basic songcraft, these girls have managed to like refine how they specifically can execute this to its maximum potency. And it's been something that I have just listened to endlessly over and over and over again. All of the wittiness of the writing, the dry humor, the sincerity, all of it is just, it bleeds out of this in a way that feels so captivating from first listen to all the way like now in December. I'm still noticing little bits of detail, little like, you know, the parts of the synths on this song that just still like captivate me just as much when I first heard it. And it makes me happy that this level of quality, I guess, is being maintained for them, because it gives me confidence in their future as a group, as solo artists, whatever. But like, even if they never come back to like making another Boy Genius record again, it was more than worth it, just because I think the record we ended up getting was fantastic, but because you have a song like this to serve as the golden standard for all things like this that should be held up and compared to. Like, this is the standard for a sort of indie pop rock singer-songwriter song for me, and I just couldn't be more pleased with it. Just an instant classic in my eyes.
This is another song that I have some difficulty quantifying. I don't need to get into it. I don't want to get into it, but I was really struggling at the beginning of this year. The release of this single and really the eventual release of this album as it rolled out, it was as if it shone down from the heavens in the middle of the rain cloud that was lingering over my head at the time, and just said that somebody else gets it too. There is infinitely more value in dusting yourself off and moving forward than there is in wallowing, and as necessary as wallowing is sometimes, the only way out is through. And there's so few things that I could ever think of that embody that in tone and message and writing, in the production and sound of something as this song does. I found it particularly exciting as a sonic direction for Rustin as well. This really full, bold, expansive production that the song turns into by its, you know, in the final minute of it or so. Just made it into my top 5 most listened to songs of the year, basically off of the back of listening to it over and over and over again when it was the only single out. Really feeling what this song was relaying in that time.
Rustin does a lot with a little here. Just the tuning of the guitar and the layering as well. The double tracking is great. His vocal control is incredible. The way that he sings and delivers certain lines makes you feel a flood of emotions from, very little. I just want to lose control. I want to fly like I've never flown. The way he sings that is so good. The way he sings that, I actually really love the line, I want to feel like I've never known, because it's an example of something I love when it's done well, which is a line that makes no grammatic sense, but is really moving. Like, I want to feel like I've never known isn't a grammatically sensible sentence, but you get what he means. And I love that. I love when words fail someone, but they're able to turn that into something that's better than if they had found the right words. Because I love that. That's just a tiny little thing about the song that I absolutely love. I'm glad we could shout out Rustin in this list.
I slaved over which of these songs on the latest Yves Tumor album I was going to put on here. But the reason that I chose Heaven Surrounds Us Like a Hood is that I think this is just a perfect emblem of Yves Tumor as a whole. It is structurally incredibly unique. It's like a God is a Circle from the same album, where when I first heard it, I was like, I mean, I think I'm into this because I'm into Yves Tumor's music, but also like, what? Like, I don't really like a lot of the most ironclad connections I've formed with music this year have been from like initially thinking something was very good and then a couple weeks on ultimately thinking it was masterful. I grew with basically all of my favorite albums of the year, and this was a prime example of a song. The first time I heard it, I was just like, I don't really know what to think of that. I mean, I think it was kind of cool, I guess. And then every time I came back to it, I was just like, holy fuck, the kaleidoscopic spiral of the midway passage through this song with the acoustic guitar, and it's like right after the little spoken word bit here, is one of the most spine-chilling moments in music this year. A colossal sounding song that's just super opulent, but also like jagged and noisy and weird. What makes Yves Tumor one of the most exciting artists working right now is that I can say that his most recent albums have been like, you know, Prince does The Flaming Lips, but that only eclipses like half of what this album actually sounds like. It's one of the most rawly creative things I've ever heard, and there is no better testament to its awesome artistry than Heaven Surrounds Us Like a Hood. Just one of the first like truly show-stopping moments in music this year for me.
The song also made my final list as well, and it was the same situation of I was spoiled for choice for which song on this record to pick. This is one of the albums of the year that has grown on me the most. But with this song, I'll just add, I love how committed Yves Tumor is in this song with this idea of transcending your form and yourself. And, you know, there's allusions to God and the connection with God that a lot of people have, but specifically also as well that feeling from a very young age as well that God is associated with freedom, with escape, with some sense of transcendence. And the song, which by the way has one of the best song titles of the year, the song completely embodies that feeling of total self-transcendence, of total oneness with something greater. As cheap as it can sound when I put it like that, the song fully embodies that, and the experience it gives you through Yves Tumor's incredible psychedelic soundscapes of putting you in that body exploding mindset with the switch up that happens in the second half of the song. There's few moments in music this year that hit as hard as that for me, so I'm glad it ended up making both of our lists. Home is Weir are one of the most celebrated acts in emo at the moment. And a cynic could contextualize that by saying that there's very little competition in emo at the moment. Emo is not necessarily, well, it is kind of a wee bit stagnant at the moment. It's not exactly as booming as it has been, say, 3 or 4 years ago, even. But nevertheless, regardless of the context, Home is Weir are one of the most celebrated acts in emo at the moment, and it really felt like a coronation with the release of The Wailer. Their first full-length project, shall we say, landed with an absolute crash into my psyche. We deep dived into this album with great detail in a review earlier this year, which actually was acknowledged by the band as one of the better reviews that they've seen of the album. And I bring that up only because I'm gonna bring that up every fucking opportunity I get, because holy I mentioned in that review as well the structure of the album's interesting because it kind of technically starts with the 4th track and finishes with the 3rd track in terms of the flow and narrative. But they've structured the album such that it starts kind of in media res with the opening track Skin Meadow, which is the song that's made it to the number 2 spot on our Songs of the Year list because of how highly it placed on both my list and Jake's list. In fact, it rocketed up to my number 3 spot just in the last week of preparing for this video. There are few songs this year that have made me feel the way that the furious, raucous guitar of the song makes me feel. That repetition of Skin Meadow, Skin Meadow, Skin Meadow, Skin Meadow over and over again. The repetitive invocation of body horror as well. That is all over the album as a whole, but leads off with the gloriously disgusting imagery of kites and intestines tangled in branches. I'm spilling my guts. The feeling of being physically drawn, like in the medieval torture sense, carries across this whole album, and it is a manifestation of dysphoria and body dysmorphia at its most extreme and violent. Not just even dysmorphia, not just even feeling as though, you dislike your body or you don't belong at it as well, but feeling this sense of violence existing between you and your body, and also between the third party of basically every single human being who views your body and judges it and creates a identity for it outside of your control. You just want to rip it all apart and set it all on fire. You want to decorate the treetops with your intestines. You are completely torn asunder. Large portions of the song are just instrumental. It's just that repetitive guitar riff just barreling forward. But you also get two incredible declarations from vocalist Brandon McDonald that are, very simple on the face of it, but in their delivery and in their impact are two of my favorite lyrics of the year. Forgive me for giving a shit, and I'm looking forward to looking back on this. Again, very simple if glib lyrics on paper, but when they take almost a minute to sing because they're being hammered and howled so hard, I've clung to that shit all year. I'm looking forward to looking back on this. Forgive me for giving a shit. A shit.
Shit.
It's just the pain, just savage, raging, self-hatred, violence, just is all fucked anthem of the year for me. Every year has to have a song like that. I'm grateful that it's been the kind of year where a song like that isn't my number one, because that would maybe say some less hopeful things about where I'm at. It's only made it to my number 3, but God knows I've needed it. Home is Where Skin Meadow. You just need it.
I'm not even kidding. When listening to our playlist of songs to like properly rank them for our list this year, I'm the first person who shows up to my workplace. So there's like an hour where there's nobody else in the entire building. You can bet your ass that the most recent time I listened to it, I was walking around an empty supermarket, absolutely bellowing, "Scared Meadow, Scared Meadow, Scared Meadow, Scared." And let me tell you, therapy could fucking never. When I finished doing that, I was like, this is the single best I felt all fucking year, man. Holy shit.
And on that note, our favorite song of the year. I called this before we even started putting the list together. I was so sure this is what it was going to be, and it surely is.
So you are tired of us, so rest your head.
When we did our video on Sufjan Stevens this year, which is, I'm very proud of a lot of the content that we've made this year, honestly, but that's one of my favorite things I feel like we've ever done, just because we get to the heart of Sufjan. I think at least what speaks to us about him in particular so well. And that's why I loved getting to the ultimate discussion of Javelin, just because I feel like we were kind of still working through how we felt about a lot of the complicated messiness of that album as we talked about it. And it made for an interesting sort of unearthing. But when I said that So You Are Tired is the best song that Sufjan Stevens has ever written, and, that's not exactly an easy task when I'm as big of a fan as Sufjan as I am. And also when I think that, like, his like batting average for having some of the best songs ever written are like, he's got like 5 perfect songs on every one of his albums, like bare minimum. Like any of them could conceivably be considered his best. And this is by no means a definitive label, but to me, when it comes to the raw achievement of his songwriting, when it comes to his dense and flexible metaphorical language, and how he can often challenge his audience by thrusting himself into a particularly emotionally ugly light that might, conflict with your pre-established idea of who Sufjan is in a really confrontational way, this epitomizes that so well. So You Are Tired is a moment on Javelin where, when it comes to the thorniness of Javelin and how it dissects how Sufjan, living in the wake of loss and however you want to interpret that, and dealing with someone he cares about leaving him in one way or another, and how this song is sort of a childish rebuke of that, and how he's sort of internalizing all of these things that it doesn't mean. Like, all of these sentiments are things that Sufjan is distorting through his own perspective and then relaying to the listener. And then eventually afterwards you get Javelin and Shit Talk, which are sort of him coming to the realization of like, I was completely off base. I was, interpreting this in a way that is completely antithetical to how this experience should go. And the way it deals with that is so expert, in my opinion. It's an amazing sounding song too. It's the gorgeous, full indie-tronica folk lush thing that, doesn't disappoint in the same way that anything he's made doesn't disappoint. But it gets to the heart of Javelin as a record the strongest, I think. The reason this album, I feel like, has struck a chord with so many people is that it is so naked. It is so bare, and it is so like bravely unafraid to showcase Sufjan warts and all, that there is always going to be something at the core that is deeply relatable, whether or not you are in the wake of heartbreak or grieving or whatever. The sentiment at the core of this song of realizing that you have, that you, who maybe needs to do some personal growing, has, interpreted something, an action of another person, as being like a slight against you, when in fact it's something that they have no control over. The indifference, the cosmic scale of the universe feels like it looms heavy over Javelin, and I feel the presence of that almost existential weight weighs down every single lyric of this.
It's like what I said about Show Me How, which is my song of the year, and this is also, of course, up there, where there's songs about realizing how dependent you are on someone else and the scariness of being kind of thrown out into the world to fend for yourself when you have used that dependence as a crutch so much. And that you can read that, you can put that through metaphor into any number of different life experience contexts. It doesn't even have to be about an intimate relationship. But whereas Show Me How is about that open-ended hopelessness, that sense of uncertainty that comes with someone's life or your connection to someone being like an open-ended sentence that doesn't have a finish. Whereas this song is about realizing not just that this person you've put so much dependence on and so much of yourself into in terms of your identity, not just realizing that they aren't going to be in your life anymore, but also realizing that you have to make a choice to take care of yourself. You have to make a choice to free yourself. And that's what the song is about to me. And it's about and Sufjan, so much of what makes the song relatable and down to earth is how willing Sufjan is to be petty and juvenile and selfish about it, because he experiences and he expresses a lot of the emotions that, before we get used to this kind of not necessarily rejection, but before we get used to this kind of ugly reality that is experiencing the realization that, everyone else's lives are outside of your own and independent of your own, and sometimes you can be more connected to someone than they are to you, and you've got to have that sense of realizing that no matter how close you are to someone, no matter how much someone means to you, you will always be a separate, independent entity from them. And it's an important realization to have. Like, it's an important thing to understand. It's an important part of growing up, is really internalizing that. And so Sufjan brings a voice to that feeling, to the ugliness of that experience, and also just invites you into sharing the heartbreak of that feeling. that to process it, to in a healthy way move through it. And even outside of all of that, without even interpreting it lyrically in any particular way, if you just want to listen to it, you will hear a song that feels like someone is singing to you with understanding of whatever pain you're going through. And it's just those vocals, man, those fucking wordless oohs and ahs are
Mm.
like being held. And the fact that the song ultimately is about learning to hold yourself only makes that feeling stronger, I would say. That brings us to the end of our list of the 20 best songs of 2023. Let us know what you thought of our picks and what your favorite songs of this year were in the comments below. We will be back very soon as we can be, with our list of the 20 best albums of 2023. So stick around for that, and we hope we'll to see you there. Until next time, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, Lays, bet you can't eat just one.